Fine. So if you want to kick us off, I think we're ready to go.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Adam and Dave. Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. My name is Gina Spatafor, Trade Show Manager for NEC Display Solutions, and welcome to today's webinar where we're going to be reviewing NEC's LCD video walls. And before I turn it over to our presenters, I just want to go through a few things. All lines have been muted. If you do have any questions, feel free to use the chat and we will try and answer those throughout the webinar. Today's presenters are Adam Sowers and Dave Arnott, Consultant Relations Managers, both part of our NEC Solutions Group. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dave and Adam.
Thanks, Gina. So just to introduce myself, Dave Arnott with NEC Display Solutions, the East Coast Consultant Relations Manager. And I'll pass over to Adam to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I think I know the majority of everybody that's logged in. So again, thank you for joining us today, and I cover the West Coast.
Perfect. So with that, the agenda for today, we're going to, with all the webinars we've all been through, either on the side that I'm on today presenting or on your side tuning in to listen. We know there's probably some fatigue out there, but I think some of the messaging that we have is really important, and it does give us a good time to learn and maybe go a little deeper. So we thought that we would put together a series that was a little bit more interactive from a live demo perspective, as well as a presentation, and really kind of go down into detail a little bit more of a single product. And in this case, today is sort of the NEC video wall series. So, we're kind of trying to get this done in 30 minutes. We're going to talk about the UN series and some of the new features with our Generation 2 product. And then in there, Adam will take over about 10 minutes through or so and show us a live demo of some of the features that I will bring up in the first half. And then from there, Adam will take it and we'll kind of both go through some of the wiring examples just to show you some of the capabilities that are built in to an NEC video wall screen and some of the do's and don'ts and things the gotchas, and maybe we can give a few tips to things that we may have not known, either in selling video walls to your customers, designing video walls for your customers. So that's generally the goal that we have today, and then we'll end that with a Q&A session from the chat, and then tell you about the next 2 episodes that we will have. So moving on to the UN series, and anyone who's been on our webinars has seen this picture, and this is from Infocom last year, and this is where we introduced our second series video walls. And we had over 80 displays, and one of the things that we were most proud of our technology was that we did not have to use any calibration when we installed these. And I think that's one of the takeaways from today is that we'll talk about is the out-of-box calibration. And we'll talk about how we achieve that through some of the feature sets. So just to go very basic, because we do have the models that I will show you on the next slide, to understand when you see our model number from NEC on the display side, try to understand our naming scheme. But UN is ultra narrow, so anything with a UN means it has a very small bezel. The bezel could change in size, but it means it's in the ultra narrow category. The 2 first numbers designate the size, so 55, 49, 46 is the diagonal of the display, and then the 2 is gonna let us know that's our second generation that we're talking about of our UN series. Some of you may be familiar with our earlier generation that would begin with an X, but this is our second generation of the UN prefix. And then where it kind of gets a little bit trickier is the post text, which is either blank, or has a V for value, or has an S for the bezel gap. So it's S would be for the smallest bezel. So as you kind of look through it on the next slide, you'll kind of understand as you can put the naming to the product. So as we look at the portfolio that we have today, there's 8 total displays, right? So they're all 24/7, and they can all support landscape or portrait when thinking about video walls. So with the 46-inch, there's the UN 462A and the 462 VA. V is we consider, let's say, value, but it's 500 nits versus 700 nits. In the 49-inch, we use S and VS because we've gone down to a smaller bezel gap. As you see in the 46, it's a 3.5 millimeter, as we use S and VS for the 49 because we've gone down to a 1.8. And the S is the slim, but that's a 700 nit panel. The VS for value is the 500 nit panel. Moving on to the first of the, we have 4 displays in the 55. And the main difference here, as you can see so far, has been bezel and brightness. So a 552 with no postscript is a 500 nit 3.5 millimeter. And then with the 552V, I'm sorry, the 552 is a 700 nit. The 552V is the value is the 500 nit, but they both have the 3.5 millimeter. When you add the S, it goes to the, again, when we go move over to the last category on the right-hand side, we're looking at the 0.88 millimeter total bezel. So each monitor has a 0.44 millimeter gap. So that's the whole gap is 0.88. The 552S is the 700 nit model, and the VS for value is the 500 nit. So I know that can be a little confusing, but at least maybe with the naming scheme, understanding, and then seeing these here today, it's about brightness and bezel as far as the monitors go. So what is new about the Generation 2? Going from our previous series, the SpectraView engine is really by far the biggest improvement, and this is what gives us the ability to factory calibrate each monitor individually at the factory level, so that we're not just taking a broad set of defined specifications and putting them into every display. We're actually calibrating every display that comes off the line, and all that ability is saved within the SpectraView engine. We'll talk about that. The new connectivity, what I mean is that we've gone to an HDMI 2.0, so we can support UHD at 60 on the incoming side. And then also we have HDMI output to support loop through using HDMI, as well as the DisplayPort in and DisplayPort out. So that's something new that we'll discuss. We've increased our HDCP support through HDMI. We'll talk about that. The NEC panels are always a high haze front surface. So what that means is that they have very low reflectivity. I think that's important. We don't know what environment these are going in. The NEC is going to be ready for that environment if there's ambient light or controlled lighting. And then the full control. When we say full control, once we daisy chain our units, which we'll talk about in our wiring, you have full control through the remote. One remote control can control all units together or separately, individually, one at a time. And that also supports RS-232 input as well as the LAN daisy chaining. So you only need one control input to control all the monitors in their video wall situations. And then a lot of the other features are features that we've had in previous models, but full metal chassis, the OPS slot that gives us the ability to add third-party cards like the NVX D80 and also the NEC optional computers. We have built-in fans and sensors to control temperature as a unit, as a video wall. So that's kind of important for active cooling and longevity and reliability. We also have nice software tools like PDComms tools, Naviset, and the video well calibrator, to name a few. So moving on to what's new out of the box is really the calibration. And what we're trying to show here is that out of the box, we're actually going 5 levels of calibration, which is the luminance, gamma, white point, as well as color, gamut, and uniformity. The SpectraView engine control is new. The near seamless design of the UN S and VS, which is the 0.9 millimeter bezel gap, is new, and then we've improved the color calibration capability. Basically, we speeded up that process. So, looking at the roadmap here for the 46 and the 49, these are in the line now, and as you can see, there'll be some decisions to be made on the new product come next year in 2021. And then the 49 inches will be in limited quantities at the end of this year, as we haven't seen much traction on the 49 at this point. So I think going forward, it'll be a 46 and a 55. But again, don't hold us to that. Those are always in flux as the development teams go through and find the technologies that are available. So it's just kind of giving you what we know today. But but certainly reach out and ask if that's something that you're looking at using in the future, and we can give you a better answer at that time. When we look at the 455-inch models that we talked about earlier, they're in the line now, and they're ready to go all the way through 2021. And these are the models. The one thing I like to point out here is the construction design. When you get into the very narrow 0.88, or even on the 49-inch, the 0.1.8, they don't actually have a bezel. So they actually have an inactive screen area, but no actual bezel. It's actually just the LCD glass. So it gives a very smooth, flat front surface. So it gives her a nice fit and finish on those units. So the differences from the older products, so with the addition of the SpectraView engine, right? So this allows us for the SpectraView technology basically to be out of the box calibrated. That's what we're going to show with the live demo today. The ability to do more with the color calibrator as far as individually do uniformity and color correction on each monitor through the actual what we consider the actual sensor for color calibration. And we've also speeded up that ability to do that. So we've got really best in class and probably one of the most capable color calibrations for a manufacturer out there in the marketplace. And then the updated daisy chain functionality. And this is very important because HDMI now doesn't, before in the old product, let me step back, all of the inputs would feed through a DisplayPort output if you were to utilize our daisy chaining, if you weren't doing a processor or such, or doing direct runs. Now we've gone to a 2-cable system on the output. We're using HDMI and DisplayPort. So HDMI to support HDMI, as well as the built-in media player. The OPS, if it's set on as an HDMI output, HDBaseT and DVI, and then DisplayPort takes care of the OPS if its output is DisplayPort or DisplayPort itself. And then tile cut is another function, but that's going to be in episode 2, I believe. So we'll have more on that next Thursday. So color matching and uniformity out of the box, right? Our competitors come out of the box not matching, and then we have to go through either as is, and that's what you get, or you go through the calibration process on site, leaving it up to the integrator or NEC to come in and do that final calibration. And that's time consuming. It's at the end of the project. This way here, I think being able to add uniformity out of the box saves the reseller from handling the calibration right out of the box on a new install. It also makes it just easier and a better experience for everyone. That obviously these video walls can be touched up with calibration, but the goal here was to be able to not need calibration on a brand new install, and that way we're really providing superior performance in our displays. And what we showed here is a screenshot of the SpectraView engine, and kind of just showing the color detail. And what we're really pointing out here is that you're seeing actual values for luminance and black level and gamma, and that's the ability to be able to calibrate these at the factory. We're not just best guessing when we say 500 nits. When we say 500 nits, we mean 500 nits. It's not 566, or if it's a 700 nit monitor, it's not at 725. That way there we can control uniformity. I think that's really important as that for the integrator and for the end user, knowing that you're going to get a great matching wall. So how is that done? In previous models, after the wall was installed, you would go through the calibration process using our calibration software, and you would get, at the end of the day, you would calibrate luminance, gamma, and white point. What we're giving you today, out of the box, as I mentioned before, was color gamut, uniformity, luminance, gamma, and white point. So you're getting these 5 steps right when that box arrives on site and gets installed, and it's all matching with each unit. So that's just such a greater improvement to the process that we had in place before. So really the goal here is to provide the best possible visual experience. And I think, NEC is a leader in video wall calibration out of the box and with our software capability. So I keep mentioning SpectraView. You're probably saying, what is that? So it's really our proprietary color engine. But what this is doing is really it's actively looking at different settings within the monitor. So as you can see from this illustration, it's taking in OSD settings, the application, the input, some of the calibration data from the factory. It's taking the video signal and looking at lookup tables. But as it ages, it's actually looking at the time that the monitor's been on, at what temperature it's been running at, and it's sort of predicting the backlight values and being able to maintain that brightness over the life. So what that means is that we have kind of control over the backlighting and maintaining the brightness of a display over a longer period of time. So if you were to look at which display model I wanted to purchase or spec, you may want to overspec and then be able to run it initially at a lower brightness, because that allows the SpectraView engine some headroom in there to actually increase the backlights as it ages to maintain that setting, so that the experience day in and day out will be the same for X amount of times, which is in the thousands of hours before the brightness will start to decrease as the panel ages. So I think that's a very powerful feature that's in these displays. So again, just a kind of another snapshot of the SpectraView engine there. And then just to touch on real quickly the corner correction. So we just to be through the calibrator, you're able to actually take an individual monitor and actually look at different segments from the left side to the right side and actually calibrate using up to a 9-point calibration pattern. So or 10 points. So that's another unique feature that we've added to the new wall. So kind of with that, and I've probably gone longer than I wanted to, but I think that it was all important, and I'm going to turn this over to Adam to see if we can pull off one of our first live demos. Adam, on to you.
So thanks, Dave. Great job. So everybody bear with us here. We're going to try something probably not really intended for WebEx, but let's see what we can do here. So hopefully at that point you see my corner wall here in the office. And we basically have two UN46 series video walls displays. So these displays have only been up a couple of weeks. I've had them on most of the morning just so that they can warm up. But from what you can see and what I see through my camera, you've got a pretty good image. You should be able to see all three ladies' faces, starting on the far left-hand side being a white image. You start to add those grays in the center, and then more of a color image on that far right-hand side. So really what we want to be able to show you guys here is a couple different things. So I'm going to go into these and I'm actually going to put them back to factory default. Get the menu out of the way. So immediately what you can see is a couple different things. We're still maintaining the majority of the color and the white balance. Being that it's going through a USB web camera, you can see that those whites have started to wash out. And really a couple different things that we're going to go in and start to adjust to get this back to, especially for those that are going to use this in a broadcast type application. What we're going to do is we're actually going to go in and I'm going to reduce the overall brightness. And my first step is to go from 500 nits down to 400 nits. And you should be able to see a noticeable difference within the camera. Almost there.
Yeah, the one thing to note is that you won't see the change until he stops at 400.
Correct.
There you go.
So there, I'll get the menu out of the way. So you can see there at 400 nits, the camera is starting to pick up the colors and the white balance better. But really the thing that I want to make sure we're pointing out is, again, this is out of the box calibration. So I've done no adjustments to these whatsoever. There's not been a sensor involved. There's been no process whatsoever other than what we do at the factory that Dave spoke of earlier. Just going a step further, I'm going to go back into picture mode, and now I'm going to drop this down to 300 nits so that you can see that difference. Almost there. All right, so there's 300. Let me get the menu out of the way. So again, you should be able to start to see how that's coming into play. And again, especially in a broadcast type environment, this is the control that we're giving you to be able to make these changes. So the next change we're going to make is we're actually going to go into the white balance, or what we refer to as a Kelvin or a color temperature. So right now, out of the factory, these come at 10,000 Kelvin is the color temperature that you're seeing currently on the screen. I'm going to reduce this down to 7,500 Kelvin. Get the menu out of the way. So again, this is exactly where we started from. So we're at 300 nits, we're at 7,500 Kelvin. And again, you can see the strength of the out-of-box calibration. I've made no other changes. I promise there's nobody standing behind the displays doing any type of trickery. This is truly out-of-the-box, on-the-wall calibration. So with that, let me switch cameras back here. All right, Dave, you want to bring the content back?
Should have it.
Perfect, I do. So let's go into a little bit more is the importance as far as daisy chaining goes. So as Dave mentioned earlier, with the new UN series, we've got both DisplayPort and HDMI outputs. Really the thing to keep in mind with this as you're moving forward is HDMI to HDMI only. So we can't go cross format, so to speak, to take an HDMI in and give that a DisplayPort out. It has to stay the same. And really keep in mind that it's only HDMI number 1. So input 1 to output is exactly what I've got wired up here in my office. And then the one thing that I want to make sure that we're all up to speed on is this is now including up to UHD 60. So before you used to see this as UHD at 30, we now have the capability of doing UHD 60 up to a 4x4 with that built-in tile matrix. Next slide, Dave.
Yep.
Perfect. So this is some of what I just talked about. So you can see with that DisplayPort at the top, DisplayPort 1 goes to DisplayPort out as well as that OPS slot. So if you're using anything like an OPS CPU or even something from Crestron like a D80, that still plays. And then you see down below the HDMI 1, the DVI, the OPS slot, or the integrated media player all route to that HDMI out. So those are really your option sets, and keeping that in mind. It's different than what we had before with the X series, so we just want to make sure that you guys are aware of that. Next slide. So really getting into some basics of what we see, and we're really pulling these from everyday examples and conversations that Dave and I both have. So in this instance, a 3x3 basic single source. So you see an OPS computer there on the left-hand side. Again, we can now support that 3840 by 2160 coming in, and through tile matrix. In this case, we could either use HDMI or DisplayPort out to loop that from 1 through 9, and that's going to give you one large image across that canvas of that 3x3 video. The other thing we want to make sure we're, sorry.
Sorry, to go back?
Yeah, if you can. If not.
Got it.
Other thing that I would point out here is on the bottom example, RS-232, LAN, TCP/IP, or the IR remote. All of those things travel just like what you've seen here in my example. I'm using just our simple IR remote with the human sensor that's mounted to the edge. Once you do that and you set up tile matrix, the entire wall acts as one unit. So either again through RS-232, LAN, TCP/IP, or IR remote, you're going to control that entire canvas as one unified unit. Next slide, Dave, sorry. So in this instance, we're going to start talking about HDCP. So For those that don't know, high bandwidth content protection. And typically where we're seeing this is cable boxes, Blu-ray players, Apple or Mac products typically will have HDCP enabled. So we've got to limit really what we can do. And you see there almost in the middle of the slide, sorry about that, number of displays, 9 Macs without HDCP. Then once we bring HDCP into it, if it's HDCP 2.2, we have 5 max hops that we can make using the internal tile matrix. For larger display examples like a 3x3, we can add a 1x2 DA and we can start to get around that. So just because we say it can't be done out of the box, don't take that really at face value necessarily. There's ways that we can work around that depending on what else is involved in the system or what's in the head end portion of it. Next slide, Dave. Getting a little more complicated, basic multiple sources with multiple images. So you see here a matrix switcher, 8x8, direct connections for each display. This starts to give us some of that flexibility to where we don't necessarily need just tile matrix. We don't need a full-fledged video wall processor, but we can give you, again, a value engineered solution that, again, is going to give you all of those choices of content that you see there on the right-hand side. Anywhere from taking a 2x2 in tile matrix and technically moving it throughout the wall, as well as giving you individual pips. Again, not using a video wall processor as a value engineering option. Dave, next slide. So just some crude wiring examples. And again, really what I want to point out here is Dave and I, and really the entire solutions team, we're here to help you. So as you go through this and you're trying to figure out the wiring, Dave and I want to be involved in those conversations. We're happy to sketch things out or do it in CAD or do it in Revit so that you guys can see the exact wiring that is necessary to make this possible. Next slide. So again, another hybrid is we're going to now bring in a video wall processor. And as many of us know, video wall processors are typically priced out by the number of inputs and the number of outputs. So if we can reduce those number of outputs, we're again going to give you more of a value engineer type solution. So in this scenario, you can see that we're going to use 5 legs off the video wall processor. We're then going to use tile matrix within each grouping. It's still going to give you an output of that 3840 by 2160. So we're going to give you maximum resolution, but again, we don't have to go to a full-blown video wall processor. And again, as we talked about before, LAN, RS-232, or IR control is given, so that entire piece of canvas is going to be controlled as one unified piece. Next slide, Dave. So again, just another wiring example of what Dave and I have actually drawn out for potential customers. And this is exactly what we just spoke about. There's a video wall processor on the head end, but we're still utilizing tile matrix within its limitations as far as HDCP and number of jumps, so that we can provide a value engineered solution, not going with a full-fledged video wall processor, still giving you great flexibility. Next slide, Dave. So in our last example, this is full-fledged video wall processors. So each line that you see represents 3 video wall connections. So we're basically going to take a single output of the video wall processor, and we're going to feed each one of our display elements independently. This giving you maximum flexibility, but also maximum cost. So there's always that trade-off of the examples that we've looked at today. Next slide. So really just closing up other pertinent features within our display sets of the UN series that we've talked about. Uniformity control is huge. The other one that we see a lot of is firmware updates via the LAN previously you had to do a hard power boot. So you had to be able to get to the toggle switch behind each one of these displays to be able to do that firmware update. We can now do that without that hard power cycle. HDCP daisy chain that we just talked about in the previous slides, both HDMI and DisplayPort. And really then just the tile matrix memory settings. So again, giving you the most flexibility being if it's anything from the start of the conversation of just using our displays with the built-in tile matrix, or adding simple DAs, or even doing hybrid type solutions to where we start bringing in video wall processors to act as part of the system and give more maximum flexibility to the overall goal. Next slide, Dave. So with that, that's really it. We are 30 minutes on the dot. Would love to answer any questions that anybody has, or Gina, if you're seeing things that I'm not.
Can you see anything in the Q&A? Do you see anything?
Yeah, I don't see anything on my side.
Okay, so there is one. Can you daisy chain the control independently of the video signal? And can you use an outboard video wall processor addressing each display separately for video and daisy chaining the control?
So I'll start at the last question first. Yes, you can, per our example, use a video wall processor, feed each element independently. And then as far as control, you don't have to use our daisy chain control if you don't want to, but you absolutely could. So in that scenario, if I understand correctly, you would be an independent video output to every display element. You would still use our looped out LAN control. And then display number one could either be infrared, IR remote, RS-232, or LAN. And then repeat the first part of that question again, Gina.
Sure. Can you daisy chain the control independently of the video signal?
Oh, so yeah, I kind of answered that, but the question or the answer is yes, you can.
Thank you. Let me see what else.
Yeah, that brings up a good point, right? That the LAN and control is completely separate. And as far as when you talk about tile matrix, to use the NEC tile matrix, you don't necessarily have to use daisy chain. You can direct run the signal. Each monitor just needs to see the full complete signal. And then the processor, once you tell it where it is in what size the wall is and what number or where the display lies in that wall, then the display will figure that out. So it just needs the content. It doesn't have to go through any particular procedure from on the video side, but on the LAN side, that can all be just in a chain.
And that's a good point, Dave. For a long time, or a lot of times, how I've explained tile matrix is it's really pixel mapping. So you're basically telling each display element, here's the entire piece of content, but I only want you to display this XY coordinate. So it's only choosing a small portion of the overall content, and that's what your responsibility is. And then your neighbor display is going to show the next piece of content, again, on that XY axis, if that helps explain kind of what tile matrix is doing behind the scene. So with that, go ahead, Gina, I'm sorry.
Oh, nope, sorry, I was gonna ask. Let's see, I have one more. Can you control each display individually through the LAN daisy chain, or, sorry, I have to scroll down for the rest of the question, or just all simultaneously?
So through the ID setting, when you go in and you set up tile matrix, and I'll take tile matrix as the example. When you go into tile matrix, you're going to ID each display element as its own ID. And then within TCP IP, you can actually call a command based off of that display ID. So if for whatever reason you only wanted to talk to display number 2, you could do that without talking to the entire wall. So there's a couple different ways to do that through the standard control protocols that most of the majors already have in place. AMX, Crestron, Extron, they've already got those scripts written. If not, contact Dave or I, and we're happy to work with you to get those done.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, it also brings up, I mentioned quickly, PD Comms tool, which you can find on our website under service and downloads for the monitor, but you can emulate any one of the commands and actually look at the view log and see the hex code or the IR code equivalent of the hex code. But to Adam's point, yeah, I mean, the monitor ID is built into the hex code so that any monitor then can be independently controlled, which is really super important when you're going in and being able to just make fine adjustments on individual monitors, even with the remote and on setup, but even further down the line, as far as looking at our scenarios with when you're trying to do a value engineered video wall without a processor and you're trying to switch the monitors from singles to 2x2s, you need to change quite a few settings, but again, that's done with the macros and they can be done individually to each monitor.
And to that point, I mean, I think both Dave and I and multiple people off the solutions team, we've done some pretty complex video walls with some feature sets that you would really think had to have a video wall processor driving it. And it's nothing more than our displays, our tile matrix, and some pretty simplistic code control to be able to switch things in and out. So again, more tools in the toolbox for you guys to be able to utilize.
Yeah, I mean,
look at.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's you're gonna go to that thing where if you start to look at monitor and manufacturer, and then what you're getting from a feature set, and then apply some of those features that we have that we're trying to bring out today to utilize within a design to actually, like you say, you can save some. You want to use the processor, but you can bring down the cost because you can do some functionality within the display by utilizing the processor and grouping 2x2s to make UHD blocks within a larger 4x4, let's say. And then, it's sort of, it brings the value back into the display, right? So that you can actually control cost that way too.
Perfect. All right, so with that, the only other thing I'd like to just mention is, again, we're going to do 3 total episodes. So in the next episode, that'll be next Thursday, same time, we'll dig into more of that out-of-box calibration. We'll go through the live tile cut. And then the third installment, that'll be 2 Thursdays from today, we'll do more of the self-calibration, and we'll also go into the full SpectraView engine and what we're able to do with that. So if you've not signed up for those, let us know and we'll definitely get you the information that you need for that. I appreciate everybody's time today. And with that, Dave, Gina, I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Yep, I would just say, like you said, you see our contact information there, but also reach out to your local rep for information. We'll certainly work through them as well. So we're just here to help and figure out these different solutions. So I thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you, Dave and Adam, and thank you everybody for joining. As a reminder, we do have other webinars available, including projection and interactive and collaboration solutions. So feel free to join those webinars when you can. Registration or the links are available on our NEC website. And again, thank you for being here today with us. And I hope everybody stays safe and healthy. And we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Gina.
Thanks, Gina.